Hi everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Tracie Talks. We're going to try and get Tracie in here, and we'll see where this goes. And let's see here. This is a new Instagram live. There we go. There's Tracie. So we're doing this new Instagram live series. This is our first one, so apologies if there are any sort of technical issues along the way.
Thanks, folks.
So welcome, Tracie, to your show.
Thank you. You know what? I'm not sure how I joined. Did I join under my personal account or did I join under Tracie Talks? I can't quite tell.
Yeah, you're under your personal account, but that's fine.
Okay.
So anyways, welcome to Tracie Talks. This is a new Instagram live series that we're doing with Tracie Jones, who is HGSE's Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. My name is Doug. I'm the social media lead at HGSE, and I'm the producer of this series. We've got an exciting logo and sign. We got this whole thing. So anyways, welcome. I'll be sort of hanging out in the corner here, doing what I'm doing. Tracie's the host of this, and this is our first one, so this could be a complete technical snafu fest, so we're hoping it isn't, but apologies in advance if it is. So anyways, I'll hand it over to Tracie to get things going.
Thank you, Doug. I wondered if we could bring in Samantha. Samantha is our first guest for the show. So I want to welcome everyone. As Doug said, my name is Tracie Jones. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education at the Virtual School of Education. And today I just wanted to kind of like say hello and talk about what we do in terms of diversity at the Ed School. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is not what happens in the office, but what happens with our students when they're starting to think about issues that are important to them. So as we're closing out March, which was Women's History Month, I wanted to talk about gender. And so our guests are really going to talk about the work that they're doing around gender. So not sure if Samantha was able to get on. Have we been able to get her through?
Let me try sending the request again. Oh. It appears that we might have a slight issue. Let's start with Catherine and Vishal.
Sure. Okay.
Let's start with them. Let's see if we can get them in the room.
Awesome. And I see some alum on there. Shout out to the alum who are in the space. I'm going to be reaching out to y'all too to make sure y'all come and talk to us. Hey, Vishal, you're here. Hey.
Hey, Tracie. Good to see you.
Vishal, while we're waiting for Catherine, can you tell folks who you are, what program you're in? I want everyone to know you're Equity and Inclusion Fellow, and why you came to HGSE.
Yeah, hey everyone, Vishal Jain. I'm in the Education Policy and Management program, calling from Somerville, Massachusetts, proud Equity and Inclusion Fellow with Catherine here. I came to HGSE to study gender equity in education, and so I'm really, really excited to be a part of this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And Catherine, you just joined us, but I was asking Vishal to share, who you are, what program you're in, and why you came to HGSE.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Meyer-Meckler. I'm also an Inclusion Fellow at HGSE. And I study education, policy, and management. And I'm out here in Oakland, California. and I also came to HGSE to study the intersection of gender, sexuality, and race in education.
So I'm just going to start by saying what you wanted to study was incredibly powerful. However, I know what you wanted to study actually didn't show up in the spaces in which you wanted them to. So I would love for you to share with folks what you did about that and what you're doing in terms of like getting the education that you really want when it comes to having conversations about gender. And I also want to name that gender is beyond the binary of male, female. And I know that's important to the work that you do. So either one of you just jump in and talk about your work and how it relates to what you've learned here and what you're doing in addition to what you've learned.
Yeah, I can start. I want to start maybe with the last point that you made, Tracie, about I think moving beyond the binary. I think, and something that we've learned in our classes as well, is that gender is a spectrum at best, and there's so many voices to include in the conversation. I think that's something that we want to do and promote while here at HGSE. And the other piece too, I think the importance of going beyond the binary is often it's used as a way to keep people down, as a way to oppress others, by putting those boxes in place. And so I appreciate you naming that, and we really want to expand the conversation. And I think that was one of the main impetuses behind us looking to start a conference. We're hoping to do a conference on May 15th. So look out for more details for it. But just to elevate voices in this space and some of the great work that's being done. And Catherine, I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the conference that we're hosting on May 15th, the Harvard Conference for Gender and Sexuality, in that conference, we're really going to be examining ways in which we conceive belonging across gender and sexuality in education spaces. And our goal is really to situate gender and sexuality within an intersectional lens. There's so many rich topics within the education space to think about. And just to name a few, some of the things we're thinking about exploring, is how to support LGBTQ plus students in the classroom, particularly transgender and gender nonconforming students who so often don't have the supports they need at school to be supported and nurtured. And this be really doubly true for kids of color. Interested in talking about Title IX policies in higher education, talking about, exploring more expansive models of masculinity, exploring gendered leadership education, and just ways in which race, ethnicity, class, and other identities really impact people's experiences in education leadership. So there's just lots to explore, and we're really excited to collaborate with students and alumni across HGSE, as well as other Harvard schools, to talk about these issues that are really pressing and really impact all of us.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know, Vishal, your work is in higher ed, and Catherine, your work has been in K through 12. How do you see like the work that you do individually come together? Because I would think in a K through 12 space, if we're not having those conversations, Catherine, we're not preparing people to then go into higher ed and continue the conversation. And to what you've both brought to me before, actually think about changing curriculum. So can you share a little bit more about the intersections around the work that you did before you came here, what you're doing now, and what you hope to leave with?
Yeah, I can start. I appreciate you naming that. I think we know from research that identity development is salient in adolescence, and it actually spans both these periods, right? Late high school as well as college. And in both of these spaces, you see so many signals given, so many social expectations given, and norms built, that it's important to look across the spectrum about it. But there's so much work to be done just even in higher ed, in K through 12. And so I think it's been a really cool experience getting to work with Catherine to sort of see, like what are folks bringing into college, and how can we affect that once they get here. And to your point too, even in curriculum in the classrooms, when it comes even to graduate school, right? Like how are we acknowledging folks of different gender and sexualities in the classroom? How are we making their voices heard in curriculum? How are we making sure that they feel comfortable raising their hand or even going to office hours? These are things that are important, right? And you want to feel like you have a space here. So I think that's on the higher ed piece from what I've been seeing.
Yeah, and I'll just add on that it's been really an exciting thing to work with Vishal because I came from an early childhood background. And so, sitting and talking about, like what are the pedagogical approaches that are really going to foster belonging for students across the gender spectrum and for students of different sexualities, and that maybe some of the salient themes that are important in pre-K, kindergarten, first grade can even be, there's a through line all the way up through higher ed. So I think that's what's been really cool and interesting in working together, because we really come from these totally opposite sides of the education spectrum.
Yeah.
But we're just realizing that really across the board, whether it's in a preschool classroom, whether it's in a middle school classroom, whether it's in higher ed, a lot of people don't have the training and really the time and space to wade through some of these really important and complex issues. And at each stage of a child's development, whether they're 3 years old in their first experience in a pre-K or whether they're, off to college, there's some really important identity development work, and we need to really train educators to be able to foster inclusive spaces for all sorts of students. And so that's really key and important no matter what age the student is in their education experience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, because I agree. I see Jared Fox in the comments, EDLD Jared Fox. This is his work. He was doing it before he came to Harvard, and he's doing it now. So happy to have you in there, Jared. But one of the things that I wanted incoming students to learn about and to think about is actually taking charge of your own education. And that's something the two of you have done very well, while you've been here at HGSE. And can you share some of what that was? Because I know we've had a conversation and you were like, there needs to be more about gender. There needs to be a more expansive conversation in the classrooms, in the curriculum. How did you approach that? And how did you get to this conference? It wasn't a part of like what we were offering you as students. You actually created this.
Kathy, do you want to start on this one?
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I would give to incoming students is find other students that are really passionate about the issues you're passionate about. And so Vishal and I were really lucky to be part of the Equity Inclusion Fellows and to meet up really early in the year and say, hey, like, I really want to explore this issue. I think it's salient to both, what we're doing. And how can we, really make some change within the institution? Because we realize that there are some, people doing really great work throughout Harvard, but sometimes you have to really look to find the spaces to really lift up that sort of gender scholarship. And so I would say, like, really reach out to other students who feel passionate about the same things you do, and then try to figure out, like, who are the people at Harvard, who are the faculty, staff members. It was so lucky that we had you, Tracie, as a total champion to say, yeah, like, explore these things. Like, I'm sure there's something that we can all do together to really further belonging in this really important realm. And so knowing that, people at Harvard were actively encouraging us to explore ways in which we can act change, have a conference, take a look at, pedagogical practices and meet with the teaching and learning lab. These are all things, that came out of relationships and collaboration between other students, between professors, between faculty members. So really reach out and ask around, because I think one of the things I was really excited about was to learn that there's space to really explore what you want to explore and to make change. And so that, I think, was really exciting and just a wonderful, opportunity that was really unique to being at HGSE.
Thanks. Vishal, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I resonate so much with what Catherine said. I think what I would add to it is, especially for those doing this degree full-time, you have a year, and something that became apparent early on is just voice your interest. I think that this is something that we came to study, and both Catherine and I saw that there were maybe not the exact classes that we want to take, our opportunities. But to Catherine's point, we came and talked to folks like Tracie, we talked to professors, and I have appreciated both the institution's ability to be candid, right? Like Tracie started this conversation saying there was a gap, and how are we addressing it? But pretty upfront about it, right? Not trying to hide it. And then two, giving us space to support it and being our champions as well, and giving us space to build the work experience around it. I hope to continue doing this work after HGSE, and part of taking advantage of these opportunities of support, both from faculty, staff, students, is the space to build a body of work and get your feet wet with it, if that makes sense. And so come in. I think we applied to HGC with a mission written on our, on our hearts, as cheesy as that sounds, and just make sure people know it. They'd love to hear it and love to support you, but they won't know unless you say it.
Yeah, I agree. We won't know unless you say it, so speak up. I am going to bring in our next guest, but before we leave, I just want to remind folks of that conference date. Is that May 15th?
Yes.
Okay, so folks, save the date, May 15th. If you're not on the hub, get in the hub, because that's where we're going to post the information. And then, of course, our social media guru, Doug, is going to make sure that you see it on our social media platforms. But thank you so much, Vishal, Catherine. It's always great to see you. And I'm going to now bring in Samantha.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much for having us.
Okay.
So I don't know. Okay.
There we go. All right, let's see if we can get Samantha now.
Samantha, please come through.
All right. Now we'll see if this works.
It's working.
It's
There we
working.
go.
Can you guys hear me okay?
So good to see you.
There we go.
Would love for folks to know who you are. So if you could just share your name, your program, and why you came to HGSE.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. So I am Samantha Fletcher. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you have some feedback.
Yeah, I do. I'm clicking off of a Zoom. Okay, there was a background. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. My Zoom was taking a while to just like go all the way off. Okay. So yes, I am Samantha Fletcher. I am in the Technology, Innovation, and Education program at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and it's a one-year program, so I'll be wrapping up soon. Sad to say, because I am not ready to leave, but it is it is what it is. I'm what's called a Saul Zantz Fellow for commitment to early childhood education, and I'm also an Equity and Inclusion Fellow. So those are some of the roles that I have at the ed school.
And why did you come here?
Why did I come here? That's a great question. It's the only graduate school I applied to. This is a second master's degree. So I went to University of Maryland. I have one there for curriculum and instruction, but I was a journalist prior to that. And I wanted to, I'd been teaching for about 11 years, and I was starting to miss that journalism bug. And I wanted something that would combine my experience in journalism and media with my passion for education and equity and all of that. And I found the Technology, Innovation, and Education program, and it just sounded perfect. And so I applied, and here I am.
Awesome. And it has been perfect. I know everything is perfect.
Exactly,
But,
of course.
I was talking earlier with Vishal and Catherine about closing out, March as Women's History Month and having this conversation on gender. And what you're doing next week is actually talking about gender, womanhood, and Black womanhood. And I would love for you to share, one, your event, but can you tell us how that event came about? Just would love for folks to hear that first.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, Tracie, I didn't say thanks for having me and Vishal and Catherine all on here. And speaking of, my event's about Black women. So I'm wishing you, I'm excited to be on your inaugural show and wishing you the best of luck with it. So as far as what I have coming up, it's an audio-visual production on Black women. And it's, as you said, next Wednesday and Thursday, the 7th and the 8th, screening and a panel discussion. And it was born out of a course I took called Say Her Name. Dr. Kaya Stern, Janelle Fouché were leading that course. And, Black History Month has ended, as you mentioned. Women's History Month is wrapping up. And so what do we really know about Black women? I saw this Goldman Sachs article that was released just a couple of weeks ago. And it was a study called Black Womenomics. revealing the truth about the condition of Black women. And it starts out by stating that Black women face a 90% wealth gap. 90%. And it goes on to mention our earnings gap, our education gap, our capital access gap, housing gap, health gap, gappity gap, right? So all these gaps, I'm like, we need some braces. But seriously, I was thinking, you know, how do we bridge these gaps? We continue to be erased, and it's sad because and not only is it unfortunate for us, but the folks erasing us are really shooting themselves in the foot, because centering Black women helps everybody. Everybody benefits. And so how do they benefit? In what ways? Well, that's a part of what my audiovisual production gets at. It was created, again, for that course, and it's on the Black women, the juxtaposition of centering Black women versus the erasure that we so often receive. And why are we erased or dismissed or treated like we're invisible? It's not like you cannot see us, right? We're coming in all shades of brown, but people still act as if they don't. And so the production will touch on that. Why are we erased? What critical, pivotal people have been erased? And that was one of the big learnings for me, to see so many women that have been erased, and to learn how impactful we were to the civil rights movement, only to never have had our stories told. So that was a piece that you'll see. And so what's going on with our erasure, and then what happens when we're centered? We're going to look at that. And what do I mean when I say that everyone benefits? So we'll cover all those things. And I hope people will walk away kind of really examining how they treat and think about and consider Black women, and examining their roles in perpetuating any of the negative treatment that any erasure that we receive.
That's awesome. I really appreciate you sharing that information. One of the things that I thought was so powerful, you know, about the event that you have coming up is where it was born out of. And it was born out of a class, Say Her Name. And so I would love for you to share with folks about like how you did this project. Like that is not what Dr. Stern was expecting when she got that final project. But what was the impetus, you know, behind what you took from the class learning and what you actually produced?
Yeah, that's so funny you asked that. That was not what she was expecting. I think part of that is my interest, again, like I'm in TIE, I'm interested in technology and media and all the moving parts of video. You know, there's videos in there, there's interviews, there's the written word that's shown, and so it's all these pieces that have come together. But that course, you know, I did not expect to find a course called Say Her Name at Harvard. I didn't find a different course called Creating Justice in Real Time that I took last semester at the Kennedy School about, you know, helping draft policy for police brutality. These are just things I didn't expect. I was glad to see them here. And I thought, it's so funny. My major was what it was, and I had to take a certain amount of classes for it. But I was like, I can't not take this. When will I have this opportunity again? And so in the Say Her Name course, you know, we explored a lot about Black women, and, you know, different weeks would be about different things, and the hurts and the hardships and the journeys. And they had chosen some really good writers, you know, the stories that we'd read. Ultimately, you had to take something from that, and what would you come up with? What might you write about? What piece of that? And what was sticking with me was how I would learn about all these awesome, powerful things we were doing, and we wouldn't be getting credit, or we would be getting erased. And also, she wanted a paper, she said you could do something different. And I thought somebody in the class that knew I also host a podcast called Daily Border Crossings. And they said, why don't you make a podcast episode? Someone else said, why don't you make it a campaign? And years ago, I started this sort of campaign called #US2 to just bring awareness to Black women. And that's, you know, it's on my Twitter, it's on my Instagram. And I was like, oh, what if I do, I don't know much about campaigns, but what if I make this partly a campaign, partly a podcast, partly a video. And typically my podcast had been audio only. So I was like, you know what, this is going to be a video version. This will be all those things. I called it a pod pain. And I infused all of those parts in there. And I remember this was a module, and a module, for those who don't know, is a course that's only half the semester. So the amount, I think it said a lot about how much it meant to me, because I took I spent so much time on that. Like you would have thought it was a semester course. I spent days and stuff just really researching and pouring through and creating this piece and going back and editing and all of that. And I was pleased that the people who taught the class were almost as excited about it as I was. So, and I was glad to show it to you and for you to end up finding it and wanting to share it with a greater audience too.
Yeah, I will say, folks, I am in the process of writing my dissertation, and the content, I was like, oh my God, I could put this in my literature review. So I really took to it, and I actually watched it and I took notes. So I hope folks can come out next week. Can you say the dates again?
Yeah, so it's Wednesday, April 7th at 6:30 is the screening. And I can see, it looks like the link, the link to it just got dropped in the chat. So it's tinyurl.com/say her name Black women. You can register. It's open to the public, not just to Harvard students. So Wednesday is a screening starting at 6:30, and then Thursday will be a panel discussion about it. And I'm hoping that Black women will, bring your voices, bring your thoughts about what you see, but also about what what your takeaways might have been from this piece. That's also starting at 6:30 on the 8th.
And this is open to everyone, right? It's not just for Black women. It's about Black women experience, but we want everyone to come and participate, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. Yes, this is Black women. We live in this world where with people who are not also Black women, but I think I would love for Black women to come for sure. And I do want other people to come and really think about what you're doing and things like that. And that touches on some, well, I don't know if you're going to ask me. I had some other thoughts about some work I'm doing.
Say it.
Well, some work that I'm doing at Harvard in general. When thinking about, there's this production, but there's also extra work as an equity inclusion fellow. And I was just going to talk a little bit about why that was important to me. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I mean, look, it's Harvard, right? It was the first university in the country, the Ivy League, this prestigious thing, and if we think about anything that was considered first, kind of in this country, who it was created for, and it was created for white men. And to quote Nia Long, she was in a recent Crimson article that I read, and to the Black community, Nia Long is everything, she means a lot to us, but she talked about, to many people in white America, she was too Black, she was too light, she was not good enough, and she wasn't given countless opportunities. And she said that in this world where white men are running things, they're not stopping to say, let me check and let me hear what Black women think. And so I will say one of the things that I've appreciated since I've been there is that professors and leaders have been very welcoming and receptive and interested in my efforts. You have been, I appreciate that, but I'm talking about white faculty, Black faculty, other nationalities, men, women, have been really receptive. And so I'm taking that window and running with that. And so I'm not coming to necessarily conform to the Harvard world, but to expose Harvard to my world and expose others to others. And so I created this thing called Tie-Dye, which is an equity component to the technology, innovation, and education thing. And again, the professors are involved. We have a series coming up where they're going to lead some stuff. And so on a bigger scale, because it's Harvard, I think that moves your resume to the top in a lot of ways and in a lot of places. And so for me, I was thinking, a lot of my peers will be leaders in their respective fields. And my field will be the tech world, the ed tech world, and where, quite frankly, there's not a lot of people who look like me, women or people of color. And frankly, many of my peers at Harvard are not people of color, or they're international and they don't sort of understand the race and equity context the way it exists in the US. And so for those reasons, it was important to me to just find ways to do my part to host events and raise awareness and invite people who don't get it to kind of help them understand, in the hopes that when they go on to lead schools and organizations and institutions, that they'll lead them from a place of equity and understanding. So that's another small piece of my being here that I discovered.
I think that is a large piece and an amazing piece. And I'm glad we ended on that. So this was our inaugural episode. I hope people really enjoyed the conversation in Harvard fashion. I'm dashing from one thing to the next. So I really appreciate you all being here. And we'll be doing this every month. So stay focused on our Instagram channel so that you can get information for the next time that we'll be here. Thank you, Samantha. I will see you next week. I hope a number of people will see you next week at your event. And thank you, Vishal and Catherine. And thank you, Doug.
There we go. We got the sign.
Yes,
Doing
and
the
of course,
sign.
everyone who showed up.
Tracie,
Like, I'm
thank
so
you,
happy that all of y'all came to hear me talk. I could see my mother being like, stop scrunching, Tracie, but I couldn't help it. So, hey. But
way to go, Tracie.
Yeah.
thank you,
And,
everyone. And have a good day.
All right.
Bye.